It's the end of an era for Nebraska football. Hello, everybody. I'm Sam McKewon with the Omaha World-Herald, omaha.com and huskerextra.com. Adrian Martinez is heading to the transfer portal. He announced that today, and we want a little bit of reaction on what he did. The stats behind me kind of tell the story of an incredible statistical career for number 2 at Nebraska. He's been the quarterback there from 2018 until the Wisconsin game when he left with a severe shoulder injury. He's since gotten surgery for that injury, and he's got a long rehab ahead of him. But he has announced that he's going into the transfer portal. So Nebraska has to move on. We will talk about moving on first, and then we'll get to the legacy of Martinez here in a second. Let's get first to the news. With Martinez going into the portal, it's likely he's not coming back to Nebraska, and Nebraska's going to have to turn the page. They have to turn the page quickly. They have a quarterback who has one career start in Logan Smothers. He played pretty darn well for 3 quarters against Iowa. Not so well in that 4th quarter as the Huskers lost 28-21. That was, fairly impressive moment for Smothers, at least for 3 quarters. And so, they've got one guy with one start. Behind him is Heinrich Haarberg, a player that we really haven't seen except for a spring game, kind of a wild colt, 6'5", 215, 6'6", 215. It's got a lot of natural ability, big arm. But we don't know a ton about him. Richard Torres is the 2022 quarterback commit, and he's very similar to Heinrich Haarberg. May even have a bigger arm than Haarberg. Maybe he's even a little skinnier than Haarberg. And so I think it's going to be a multi-year discussion with those 2 guys. They still have developmental things to get through. And then you have Smothers, who is about 6'2", 200, kind of an option quarterback, would fit an option system. And then you have the question mark of who's Nebraska's offensive coordinator going to be, and is that offensive coordinator going to bring a quarterback with him from wherever he comes, or is Nebraska going to get 1 or 2 quarterbacks from the transfer portal? I think all of those things are possible, and I think, in fact, they're likely. It would be hard for Nebraska to roll into a make-or-break year for Scott Frost with a quarterback who only has 1 career start. As well as I thought Smothers played at times in that game, you may want to consider bringing a senior in who's got a little bit more seasoning and maybe a few more starts under his belt, at least to push the competition. That's the one thing Adrian Martinez did not have in 2018 when he came to Nebraska and he enrolled early. Remember, he was competing against Tristan Gebbia and Patrick O'Brien, and neither one of those guys had really played much football. Both of them transferred out. Noah Vedral came in. Vedral didn't have much more experience than Martinez, and even though he played fairly well in a couple games in 2019, Adrian Martinez just really never had that kind of competition. Somebody to mentor him, somebody to push him, somebody to really prod him along. He didn't really have that. And Smothers has had that with Martinez, right? So he's been there for a year, but he needs somebody else. They need better competition at that position, and they also need to do a better job around the quarterback at offensive line, at running back, at receiver. So all of those questions are now kind of on the table. The big question on the table, obviously, who is that offensive coordinator going to be? Can that person bring a quarterback with him, or do they go out and get somebody else in the transfer portal? There's a lot of big names in the transfer portal, folks. A lot of big names. Spencer Rattler's there. Jake Haener is probably going from Fresno State back to Washington is in there. There's some other really good players in there. I'm not sure how high on a pecking order Nebraska is going to be, but don't forget that the Huskers have reasonably good NIL money, and that may help them. They have kind of an ABM fund, and maybe that can help them draw a player. So we'll see. At this moment, I think it was time to maybe get a fresh start for Martinez and for Frost, but there's no question that you lose a lot of experience now with Martinez going in the portal. Not Adrian. I've talked to Adrian, I don't know, so many times through media interviews and out in the hall and all of those things. And let's be clear, the Martinez is a top shelf guy, high class all the way, was always very giving with his time. Very generous with his time. He was always really good with that stuff, and you have to appreciate the kind of person he was, his personal story, the way that he loved people around him. He's a 3-time captain, which is rare. It means his teammates respected him, and certainly coaches respected him. And so you have to put the personal stuff up front, because that's kind of how people are going to remember him who covered him and played with him. They're going to remember those kind of things about him. From a fan perspective, he is, I guess, a cautionary tale. He's emblematic, I think, of the struggles that Nebraska's had in the first 4 years under Scott Frost. A lot was asked of Adrian Martinez. You can look at the numbers, and he did a hell of a lot. Look at that. I mean, he threw for almost 8,500 yards, and he rushed for more than 2,000 yards, which is rare for a quarterback. And he accounted for 80 total touchdowns. So he did a lot, but he also had a lot of turnovers, and there was never that signature moment where he delivered a really, really big win. Remember, the one last-second win that Nebraska had since Frost got here was Northwestern, and that was Vedral because Martinez got hurt earlier in the game. Martinez is a cautionary tale in part because it shows what happens when you rely so much on a quarterback to do so many things. He gets hurt in a bunch of different ways. Twice, Martinez hurt his knee. Once, he hurt his non-throwing shoulder. He broke his jaw. He had an ankle sprain. And then he has this severe injury with his throwing shoulder that's sort of the capper of his 4-year career at Nebraska. You cannot really survive, I think, as a football program when a quarterback gets hurt that often and you're asking him to do that many things. And so in some ways, Martinez didn't always get a fair shake from his own situation and operation because his coaches didn't always put enough around him. In other ways, I feel like he didn't always get enough competition from some of the guys in the room, and he wasn't necessarily always pushed to be better because there wasn't anybody in that room that was as good as he was. And sometimes you need people to push you. And so we'll see where Nebraska goes from here, but it was a pleasure to talk to Martinez so many different times. Maybe we'll still be able to do that after he's now in the portal. But he was a good leader for Nebraska. He took care of business off the field, graduated early, all of those things. He's a kind of a cautionary tale. And Scott Frost goes into his 5th year without a quarterback that he had spent so much time with. It may not necessarily be a bad thing for Frost. They've got to try to build an offense around the quarterback instead of asking the quarterback to bail them out of tough spots, which so often was the case with Martinez. All right, we're going to have all kinds of coverage about Adrian Martinez going in the transfer portal. Stick with us at omaha.com, huskerextra.com, and the Omaha World-Herald.